Why empaths feel lost. Carl Jung's hidden map to your true self will shock you. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Aristotle. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where we explore the deeper layers of consciousness and self-discovery through the lens of Carl Jung. In today's video, why empaths feel lost. Carl Jung's hidden map to your true self will shock you. We'll uncover why so many sensitive souls feel disconnected and how understanding your inner map can guide you back home to your authentic self. Remember, personal growth begins when you stop trying to fix yourself and start learning to understand yourself. Have you ever felt lost in the emotions of others? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And let's grow together on this journey towards spiritual awakening and true happiness. 1. The empath's hidden struggle. Empaths possess a rare spiritual sensitivity that allows them to feel the emotions of others as if they were their own. But this very gift often becomes their greatest burden. Carl Jung observed that such heightened perception creates what he called emotional fusion, a psychological entanglement where the empath's boundaries dissolve and their inner world becomes clouded by the pain, fear, and desires of those around them. In this state, they are no longer guided by their authentic self, but by the energetic tides of everyone else's emotions. The empath begins to lose their center, drifting in an ocean of collective feeling, unable to tell whether the sadness they feel belongs to them or to the world they've absorbed. This is the moment Jung's concept of individuation becomes vital, a process of spiritual awakening that leads the empath back to their core identity, to the sacred center that exists beneath all borrowed emotions. Jung believed that the path to healing begins when the empath recognizes that sensitivity is not meant to enslave them, but to awaken them. The purpose of feeling deeply is not to drown, but to understand the unseen connections that bind all life. Through spirituality, the empath learns to transform emotional fusion into conscious compassion, to observe rather than absorb. It is a shift from identification to awareness, a subtle but powerful movement from being a mirror of others to becoming a light of understanding. When the empath stops internalizing external pain, they awaken to their own essence, realizing that love and empathy do not require losing themselves in the suffering of others. They discover that their gift was never about carrying the world's wounds, but about illuminating the path to healing. This spiritual awakening unfolds gradually. At first, the empath feels an aching emptiness, a void where their own emotions should be. But that void, Jung would say, is not the absence of self. It is the silence waiting for truth to emerge. In that silence, the empath begins to sense their authentic vibration, the original frequency that existed before the world's energy entered them. They learn to protect their inner space through awareness, mindfulness, and grounded presence. They begin to draw energetic boundaries, not out of fear, but out of wisdom, understanding that one cannot heal the world by becoming sick with its pain. Spirituality, for them, becomes not an escape, but a realignment, an act of remembering that the soul's purpose is not to merge, but to emanate. Jung's hidden map to the true self is not a linear path, but a spiral journey inward. Each turn of the spiral brings the empath closer to self-realization, deeper into the awareness that their identity is not defined by emotion, but by consciousness itself. In this realization, they find freedom. The empath, who once felt lost in the storm of human feeling, now stands still at its center, radiating clarity. They understand that to feel everything is not to be everything. And in this understanding, a new kind of love is born, one that is rooted, discerning, and whole. The empath no longer seeks to be understood by others because they have finally understood themselves. And this, Jung would say, is the highest form of spiritual wisdom, the moment when the empath, through awakening, becomes not a reflection of the world's emotions, but a mirror of the divine. Have you ever felt lost in everyone else's emotions and forgotten who you truly are? If so, share your experience in the comments below so others can learn from your journey. If not, comment, "I will rediscover myself." And let's begin this path of self-awareness together through Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom. 2. The empathic shadow. Carl Jung taught that every empath carries within them a hidden psychological shadow, the unconscious need to be needed. This is the wounded healer complex, a pattern where your self-worth becomes tied to saving others, where you unconsciously seek purpose through other people's pain. You feel valuable only when you're helping, fixing, or understanding someone. Yet beneath that kindness hides exhaustion and silent resentment. You carry the unspoken anger that comes from years of emotional overextension, from giving more than you receive, from crossing your own boundaries in the name of love. This is the spiritual illusion many empaths live inside, believing that spirituality means endless sacrifice, when in truth, real spiritual growth begins with learning that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. Jung observed that this pattern often begins in childhood, when an empath learns to survive by tuning in to the moods of others. You may have grown up reading your parents' energy, calming conflict before it erupted, or absorbing emotions to keep peace. That sensitivity became your gift, but also your prison. As an adult, you may enter relationships where you constantly play the healer, the listener, the safe space, yet feel unseen and depleted. You begin to wonder why love feels like labor and why you always end up emotionally tired. Jung believed this is because you confuse empathy with merging. You take on others' emotions as your own, losing your sense of self in the process. The empath becomes a mirror for everyone but themselves, reflecting others' pain while forgetting their own reflection. The path of spiritual awakening for the empath is the path of reclaiming the self. It is not about shutting down your heart, but learning to protect it. It is understanding that your energy is sacred and that saying no is sometimes the most loving act you can offer. Jung's work reminds us that individuation, becoming who you truly are, begins the moment you stop defining yourself by what others need from you. True spirituality is not about saving the world. It is about aligning with your own soul so deeply that your very presence becomes healing. When you honor your boundaries, your light grows purer. When you stop rescuing others, you rescue yourself. When you stop absorbing everyone's emotions, you finally hear the quiet wisdom of your own inner voice. As you grow in awareness, you realize that helping others is not your identity. It is a natural expression of your wholeness. You no longer give from emptiness or guilt, but from fullness and peace. You no longer seek validation through your ability to care, because your worth is no longer built on pain. Jung's hidden map to the empath's true self reveals that love without self-awareness turns into bondage, but love guided by consciousness becomes freedom. Spiritual growth invites you to balance heart and boundary, compassion and clarity, giving and receiving. And in that balance, you find that your presence alone, not your sacrifice, is what truly heals others. Comment below, "I am ready to face my shadow," if you're ready to embrace your true self and step into your power. Let this be your moment of awakening, empath. 3. The false persona. Many empaths grow up believing that love must be earned through selflessness, and over time they unconsciously create what Carl Jung would call a false persona, a sensitive healer mask that radiates endless compassion and warmth. On the surface, this seems noble, but beneath it lies a quiet exhaustion. You may smile when you want to cry, comfort others when you need comfort, or pretend to be strong when your spirit is running on empty. The more you give, the more people adore you, yet the less you feel connected to who you truly are. Jung's spiritual wisdom reveals that this mask isn't born from deceit, but from survival. As children, many empaths learned that peace existed only when everyone else was calm. So, you adapted. You tuned in to every emotion in the room, absorbing pain like a sponge and translating chaos into harmony. It became your gift and your cage. The persona grew stronger with every moment you silenced your own needs to protect someone else's heart. Jung understood that every persona conceals a shadow. For empaths, that shadow often holds the emotions you've been taught to suppress: anger, frustration, the desire to say no, or the longing to be seen for who you are rather than what you give. When these parts of you stay buried, they start whispering through anxiety, fatigue, or a vague sense of being lost. You might think you're broken, but you're not. You're just carrying too many emotions that aren't yours. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This means that the healing path isn't about rejecting your empathy. It's about reclaiming your authenticity. The mask you wear to keep others comfortable is the same one that hides your own brilliance. To find yourself again, begin noticing the subtle moments when your kindness turns into performance. When you help because you fear rejection instead of because you truly want to, pause and breathe. Ask yourself, what do I feel right now? What do I need? Every time you choose honesty over perfection, you take a step toward individuation, the process Jung described as becoming whole. It's not easy, because authenticity demands courage. You will disappoint people who prefer the version of you that exists for their comfort. But as Jung taught, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That terror is also the threshold to freedom. When you stop defining your worth through how much you can fix, heal, or please, you begin to discover the quiet strength of simply being. This is where true spiritual wisdom begins, not in becoming more loving, but in learning to love yourself as deeply as you love others. To be authentic doesn't mean abandoning compassion. It means allowing compassion to include you. When you release the pressure to always be the healer, you make space to be human. You stop chasing approval and start embodying truth. Empaths were never meant to drown in others' emotions. They were meant to understand them without losing their center. The false persona may have earned you acceptance, but your soul craves alignment. When you finally remove the mask, you don't become less light. You become real. And in that realness, every wound turns into wisdom. Every boundary becomes an act of grace. And every breath reminds you that being true to yourself is the highest form of love there is. 4. The individuation map. The first stage of Carl Jung's hidden map for the empathic soul is shadow integration, a courageous process of facing the darkness within the unhealed parts that crave validation, the anger buried beneath compassion, and the wounds that quietly demand to be needed. Jung's spirituality reminds us that true healing begins not when we suppress our pain, but when we meet it with awareness. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. For empaths, this means recognizing how the desire to fix others often masks the longing to be seen, loved, and understood. It is a spiritual awakening that asks you to stop identifying with your pain and instead learn from it, transforming emotional chaos into inner strength. By allowing yourself to feel fully without judgment, you begin to reclaim your energy and see that your sensitivity was never weakness. It was divine intelligence guiding you toward truth. The second stage, persona dissolution, invites the empath to release the caretaker identity, the mask built to earn love through sacrifice and silence. Many empaths mistake self-erasure for compassion, believing that peace means pleasing everyone. But Jung's path of spirituality and individuation exposes this illusion. The persona is the role you play to survive in a world that often misunderstands your depth. To dissolve it is to free yourself from the burden of constantly rescuing others at the cost of your own peace. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This stage teaches that loving others does not require losing yourself, and empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. The moment you stop apologizing for your light, you begin to embody the essence of authentic love, one that nourishes rather than depletes. The third stage, active imagination, is where your spiritual awakening deepens. Here, Jung encourages you to enter dialogue with your unconscious through dreams, symbols, and reflections. This is the sacred language of the soul, where intuition speaks in whispers and archetypes reveal hidden truths. For the empath, this stage is a rediscovery of inner power, transforming emotional sensitivity into spiritual insight. Through meditation, journaling, and creative visualization, you connect with the deeper layers of your psyche that have long waited to be heard. Each dream and emotional trigger becomes a bridge between your conscious mind and your higher self. In this space, you begin to see that spirituality is not about escaping the world, but about entering it with awakened awareness, where every experience, even pain, becomes a teacher. The final stage, self-realization, marks the moment when the empath steps fully into wholeness. Here, empathy is no longer a wound, but a gift refined by wisdom. You no longer absorb others' emotions unconsciously. You sense them with clarity, compassion, and strength. Jung's spirituality shows that the goal of awakening is not detachment, but balance to love deeply without losing yourself. Healthy empathy blooms when you can give without depletion and receive without guilt. Boundaries are no longer walls. They become sacred spaces that protect your peace while allowing love to flow freely. In this state of self-realization, the empath no longer sees themselves as broken or too sensitive, but as an awakened soul, grounded, discerning, and radiant with inner authority. Through shadow integration, persona dissolution, active imagination, and self-realization, Jung's hidden map becomes not just a path of psychology, but a living journey of spiritual awakening, where the empath finally remembers that their light was never lost, only waiting to be seen from within. If this message speaks to your soul, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Your journey of self-discovery and individuation continues with every insight you unlock. 5. Archetypal empathy. Empaths carry within them the invisible currents of archetypal energy, the deep, timeless forces that Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. These energies, such as the victim, the savior, or the mother, are not random emotions, but living symbols that move through the human soul. When an empath unconsciously channels these archetypes, their empathy becomes overwhelming. They take on everyone's pain, trying to save, to heal, to comfort, without realizing that these impulses are not entirely their own. The victim archetype makes them feel responsible for suffering that doesn't belong to them. The savior archetype pushes them to rescue others, even at the cost of their own peace. The mother archetype urges them to give endlessly, even when their spirit is empty. These patterns create emotional compulsions that leave them drained and disoriented, unsure where their energy ends and another's begins. Yet Jung taught that what is unconscious rules us until it becomes conscious. Once you begin to see these energies for what they are, ancient forces, not personal burdens, everything changes. Empathy transforms from emotional chaos into sacred power. Spirituality and spiritual growth begin when awareness enters these hidden patterns. Instead of being consumed by the victim, you learn from it compassion without martyrdom. Instead of becoming the savior, you embody love without losing yourself. Instead of being trapped in the mother's self-sacrifice, you nurture from a place of balance and strength. The moment you realize that you are the vessel through which these archetypes flow, not their prisoner, your empathy becomes an instrument of wisdom rather than exhaustion. This awareness does not disconnect you from others. It connects you more deeply, but with boundaries made of light. You begin to sense emotions with clarity instead of confusion. You recognize that not everything you feel belongs to you. You become the observer, still compassionate, but anchored in your own soul. You start to hold space for others without absorbing their chaos. This is the alchemy of empathy that Jung hinted at, turning unconscious energy into conscious power, turning feeling into wisdom, turning pain into purpose. Through spirituality, you no longer drown in collective emotions. You become the healer who understands them. Every time you stay centered in your awareness, you elevate the energy around you. Every act of self-understanding ripples outward, transforming empathy into divine equilibrium. This is how the empath's journey, once filled with confusion and fatigue, becomes the very path to spiritual growth, where sensitivity evolves into sacred mastery and feeling too much finally becomes a feeling with divine intelligence. 6. Conscious empathy and emotional sovereignty. Empaths who begin to awaken often realize that they have been living their lives entangled in the emotional webs of others, unable to tell where their energy ends and someone else's begins. Carl Jung, through his profound spiritual wisdom, explained that the journey toward wholeness, what he called individuation, requires learning emotional sovereignty, the art of feeling without absorbing. True empathy does not mean merging with everyone's pain. It means standing in awareness so deep that you can witness another's suffering without drowning in it. When you reach this level of consciousness, you no longer confuse compassion with self-sacrifice. nor love with the need to fix. You begin to help others from a place of fullness rather than from the empty wounds of your own unhealed past. Carl Jung believed that when an empath loses their boundaries, the psyche becomes flooded with projections, illusions, and foreign emotions that blur the sense of self. He called this psychic inflation, a condition in which your inner world becomes too crowded with energies that do not belong to you. Spiritual wisdom teaches that this happens because empathy, when unconscious, becomes an open channel without discernment. But the awakened empath learns to close the channel when necessary, not out of coldness, but out of clarity. You start to understand that saying no is a sacred act, and that boundaries are not barriers, but bridges to authentic connection. You stop rescuing others out of guilt or fear, and instead offer your energy as a conscious gift, one that empowers rather than enables. As you step into emotional sovereignty, you begin to notice how emotions flow through you like waves, yet you remain the ocean vast, grounded, unshaken. Jung often compared the path of individuation to alchemy, where the raw lead of unconscious reaction is transformed into the gold of awareness. Each time you observe an emotion and recognize, "This is not mine," you are refining your soul. Each boundary you establish becomes a ring of light around your spirit, protecting your peace while allowing your compassion to shine even brighter. Emotional sovereignty does not isolate you. It connects you more deeply to humanity because you no longer serve from pain, but from power. You begin to radiate healing simply by being centered in your own truth. When you cultivate this awareness, you understand that empathy is not a burden, but a sacred instrument tuned to divine frequencies. You learn to sense, feel, and understand others while remaining rooted in your own inner harmony. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In reclaiming your awareness, you stop being unconsciously directed by others' emotions or the chaos of the world. You become a calm presence amid noise, a mirror that reflects truth without distortion. To be an individuated empath is to embody the balance between heart and wisdom, to love without losing yourself, to feel without falling apart, to give without forgetting that your energy is holy. This is the transformation Jung envisioned, where empathy evolves into enlightenment and compassion becomes your natural state of being. 7. Practical empathic alchemy. Emotional sorting is the sacred art of recognizing what emotions are truly yours, a vital act of self-awareness that marks the beginning of your spiritual awakening. Many empaths carry emotional energy that does not belong to them. Fear, grief, or anxiety that has been unconsciously absorbed from others. Jung's wisdom reminds us that the path to wholeness begins with discernment. When you learn to pause and ask yourself, "Is this emotion mine?" you reclaim the power to separate truth from illusion. Emotions are visitors, not permanent residents. They pass through you, but they are not your identity. The moment you become the conscious observer rather than the absorber, you begin to experience emotional freedom. You start to feel lighter, clearer, and more rooted in your own energy, understanding that empathy is not about taking on pain, but about transforming it into compassion through awareness. Boundary rituals are the next step in this empathic alchemy. They are not just mental barriers, but spiritual practices that protect the sacred temple of your energy. Every empath must learn that self-preservation is not selfishness. It is alignment with divine order. Jung once observed that loneliness is not a lack of people, but a lack of understanding. Boundaries allow you to reconnect with your inner voice and maintain that understanding with yourself. Cleansing rituals, mindful solitude, breathwork, prayer, or even spending time in nature are ways to strengthen your energetic shield. When you see your energy as sacred space, you stop giving unrestricted access to those who drain your light. Boundaries teach others how to love you properly and remind you that your peace is holy. Protecting your energy becomes a daily act of devotion, a form of spiritual discipline that keeps your empathy balanced and clear. Authentic expression is where your soul begins to breathe again. So many empaths silence their truth to avoid conflict, but this silence only suffocates the soul. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that means allowing your authentic self to speak without fear. Expressing your truth does not mean shouting louder. It means speaking honestly, with presence and love. Each time you express what is real for you, you release the tension of suppressed emotions and restore harmony between your inner masculine and feminine energies, your strength and your sensitivity. Living authentically allows your outer life to reflect your inner truth. Your words, choices, and actions begin to align with your higher self, and that alignment radiates peace, confidence, and spiritual power. The more you embody your truth, the more your presence alone becomes healing for others. Shadow work is the final and most profound stage of transformation. It invites you to confront the darker sides of empathy, the urge to fix others, the subtle superiority of believing you are responsible for their healing, or the hidden control masked as compassion. Jung revealed that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you face your shadow with humility, you uncover the deeper motives behind your empathy. You learn that true compassion does not rescue. It respects free will. It does not absorb pain. It understands pain. By integrating your shadow, you transform empathy from emotional chaos into spiritual mastery. You no longer drown in the suffering of others because you have turned your own darkness into light. That is the alchemy Jung spoke of, the process where empathy matures into wisdom, where sensitivity becomes strength, and where spirituality is no longer about escaping the world, but about living in it with awareness, grace, and divine clarity. As we move deeper into the path of empathic alchemy, let's honor the courage it takes to transform sensitivity into true spiritual wisdom. Your presence here means you're not just feeling, you're learning to transmute emotion into power. Comment below, "I am mastering the art of empathic alchemy," to affirm your growth on this sacred journey. Now, let's continue unveiling Carl Jung's hidden map to your true self. 8. Integration and rebirth. True individuation is not a gentle awakening, but a sacred dismantling of a psychological death that precedes rebirth. It is the moment when the empath finally releases the identity of the wounded healer, the one who has carried everyone's burdens, mistaking compassion for self-erasure. As Carl Jung revealed, the path of the self demands that we turn inward and reclaim what has long been fragmented. This is not a rejection of empathy, but its transformation into conscious empathy, the kind that feels deeply, yet remains rooted in inner peace. It is a profound stage of spirituality and spiritual growth where you begin to understand that saving others is not your mission. Embodying your light is. The empath who once dissolved into others' pain now becomes a radiant lighthouse, steady, luminous, and sovereign, guiding others not by rescuing them, but by showing what inner balance looks like. You no longer absorb every emotion around you. Instead, you hold them in awareness, like waves passing around a rock that does not move. This is how true healing begins, not by taking in the darkness of others, but by allowing your light to remain unshaken within it. As you grow in consciousness, the energy that once scattered across everyone's chaos now gathers within your own field, like a golden current of clarity. Compassion matures into discernment. You start recognizing that boundaries are not walls. They are sacred lines of self-respect drawn by love. The awakened empath's gift is no longer self-sacrifice, but sacred service. In this rebirth, you learn to give without depletion, to love without losing yourself, to feel without drowning. You stop confusing your purpose with the pain you once carried, realizing instead that every wound was a teacher, every heartbreak a portal. Each time you faced emotional collapse, your soul was guiding you toward the awareness that wholeness was never something to be earned. It was who you already were beneath all the noise. Carl Jung called this arrival the encounter with the self, the divine center of consciousness where opposites unite. Here, light and shadow are no longer enemies, but allies revealing the fullness of who you are. You understand that your empathy was never a weakness. It was a compass pointing toward divine integration. You no longer need to heal by merging with others. You heal by embodying your truth so completely that it naturally elevates those around you. The old empath dies so the true empath can be born, one who radiates serenity instead of suffering, one who knows that stillness is not emptiness, but power contained. This is what it means to walk the path of conscious empathy, to become light that neither blinds nor burns, but simply shines. And through that shining, you realize the deepest truth. Spiritual growth is not about adding more light, but remembering that you are light itself. When you stop identifying with wounds and begin identifying with wisdom, your very presence becomes medicine. You become what Jung called the living symbol of the self, the embodiment of balance, love, and divine purpose. This is the true integration and rebirth of the empath. A soul no longer seeking to fix the world, but anchoring peace within it, showing that real spirituality is not about escaping life, but becoming fully alive within it. And remember, dear soul, the path of an empath isn't about escaping the world's emotions. It's about remembering who you are beneath them. As Carl Jung taught, the true journey is not toward becoming someone new, but toward awakening to the self that has always been within you. So take this wisdom into your daily life and let it guide you back home to your authentic power. If this message has touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos that will continue to illuminate your spiritual path. Carl Jung's test of the soul. 7 signs you've quietly passed the darkest trial. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Carl Jung. Every soul that has walked through darkness knows the silent power of this truth. The darkest nights of the spirit are not punishments, they are initiations. In Carl Jung's test of the soul, 7 signs, you've quietly passed the darkest trial. We explore the unseen transformation that happens when life strips away all illusions and forces you to meet your true self. If you've ever endured pain that no one else could see, if you've ever emerged from chaos with deeper compassion and clarity, this message is for you. Comment below and share what lesson did your darkest night teach you. Let's walk together toward light, wisdom, and renewal here on Spiritual Wisdom. 1. Solitude becomes sanctuary. Aloneness no longer feels like punishment, but peace. What once felt like a void now feels like sacred ground. Silence, once heavy and unbearable, now becomes creative and nourishing. It feeds your thoughts, restores your energy, and connects you to something eternal within. The restless need for validation fades away as you begin to discover that your worth was never dependent on how others see you, but on how deeply you can sit with yourself. This is the quiet mark of spiritual awakening, when solitude ceases to be loneliness and transforms into a sanctuary of self-discovery and inner strength. You begin to realize that being alone doesn't mean being disconnected. It means being deeply connected to the truth of your own soul. In the stillness, your creativity awakens, your intuition sharpens, and your emotions settle into harmony. You no longer need external noise to feel alive. Your inner world becomes vibrant and rich. This is when spirituality becomes real, not as an idea, but as an experience. You feel energy moving within you, gently, powerful, steady. The silence you once tried to escape now speaks in a voice more honest than words, reminding you that peace has always lived inside you, waiting for your attention. When solitude becomes your sanctuary, you stop chasing people who cannot meet you in your depth. You stop trying to explain your quietness or your peace. Relationships shift. They become conscious choices, not unconscious habits. You connect from wholeness, not from emptiness. You no longer seek others to fill your void, but to share your fullness. You understand that love cannot grow from fear, or need it to flourish from freedom, respect, and mutual expansion. You begin to attract those who match your calm rather than disturb it, those who value your silence as much as your words. The more you sit with your own energy, the more you trust it. You stop fearing your thoughts, your emotions, your past. You start to see that everything within you is simply energy asking to be seen, understood, and released. Emotional maturity is born here when you no longer run from discomfort, but hold it with compassion. You notice that peace does not come from controlling life, but from allowing it. The constant desire for distraction dissolves, and in its place, you find focus, clarity, and the power to be fully present. In this state of spiritual awakening, solitude is no longer an empty room. It's a temple. Every moment spent in your own company becomes an act of worship, a dialogue between you and your higher self. You learn to listen without fear, to rest without guilt, and to create without seeking applause. You no longer feel separate from life. You become part of its rhythm. Solitude reveals that you are never truly alone. You are surrounded by presence, by awareness, by the quiet pulse of the divine moving through you. And that realization transforms everything. The silence, the stillness, the space, they all become your teachers, guiding you toward wholeness, authenticity, and peace. Have you ever found peace in your own silence? If solitude has become your sanctuary, share your experience in the comments below so others can be inspired by your journey. If you're still learning to find comfort in your own company, simply comment, "I'm learning to be still." And let's walk this path of spiritual wisdom together. 2. Shadow integration and sacred fire. You have faced your own darkness, jealousy, rage, selfishness, and instead of denying it, you've allowed yourself to see it as part of your humanity. This is not weakness, but courage, the kind of bravery that only those walking the path of true spirituality can understand. Because to face your shadow is to stand before the most uncomfortable parts of yourself without turning away. It's the moment you realize that what you once called your demons were simply exiled fragments of your soul, waiting for your acceptance to return home. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Through this realization, you've stopped repressing what hurts and started transforming it into wisdom. Anger has become discernible, the sharp clarity that tells you what must no longer be tolerated. Pain has become purpose, the sacred force that moves you to heal, to grow, and to help others rise. You no longer waste energy pretending to be only light, because you understand that the light itself is born from contrast. The dark, once feared, has become your teacher, your guide through the labyrinth of self. You now hold both the light and the dark within you like two sacred fires, neither of which can exist without the other. This balances this dynamic tension, as Jung called it, fuels your authenticity. You've stopped projecting your pain onto others and started integrating it piece by piece into your wholeness. Every emotion you once ran from has now found its rightful place in your heart. Your jealousy reminds you of your hidden desires. Your anger protects your truth. Your sorrow deepens your compassion. What once tore you apart has now become the fabric of your strength. This is the quiet power of spiritual growth, the alchemy of the soul. You have learned that transformation does not come from rejecting the darkness, but from holding it with awareness until it reveals its light. You now walk the world as someone who is no longer afraid to feel, no longer ashamed to fall, no longer pretending to be what others expect. The fire within you burns steady, refining, not consuming. The shadows that once haunted you have become allies, guiding you toward authenticity. You have learned that spirituality is not about escaping pain, but allowing pain to awaken consciousness. Through this sacred integration, you've turned suffering into insight and wounds into wisdom. And in that stillness, where both your light and shadow stand hand in hand, you discover the essence of your true self, whole, imperfect, and profoundly alive. Comment below, "I am one with the sacred fire," if you're ready to embrace your shadow and rise from it transformed. 3. Immunity to projection. You no longer carry the weight of other people's emotions as if they were your own. You can walk into a room filled with chaos, judgment, or fear, and remain completely still inside. What once drained you now reveals itself for what it truly is: projection. You recognize when someone tries to hand you their pain and call it truth, and instead of defending or explaining yourself, you meet it with quiet understanding. You see that every accusation, every outburst, every cold silence is not really about you, but about the wounds they haven't yet faced within themselves. As Carl Jung said, Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This is what spiritual wisdom looks like in action, the power to stay centered in your own light while others are still lost in shadow. You've reached a level of awareness where compassion no longer means drowning in someone else's suffering. You can feel deeply without becoming consumed. You can love without losing yourself. This is a higher form of empathy, one rooted not in guilt, but in grounded understanding. You no longer set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You've learned that being kind does not require self-destruction, and that helping someone does not mean carrying their karma. Your peace no longer depends on whether people approve of you, because you've learned that real love, both given and received, cannot exist without boundaries. Boundaries, once painful, have now become sacred. You build them not to shut others out, but to keep your energy pure. You've learned to say no with grace and to walk away with peace. You no longer chase validation or bend to please those who misunderstand you. The old patterns of emotional enmeshment and people-pleasing have fallen away because you've seen how they were born from fear, the fear of being unloved, unseen, or alone. But now, solitude feels like a sanctuary. You find clarity in silence. You have become the calm presence others seek when their world collapses. When you no longer take things personally, life becomes light again. Every judgment becomes a reflection you can observe without absorbing. Every emotional wave from others passes through you like wind through an open window. You see that peace is not the absence of pain, but the ability to stay still in the middle of it. This is emotional mastery, the moment you realize that your sensitivity is not a curse, but a finely tuned compass guiding you toward truth. Carl Jung called this state individuation, becoming whole, free from the projections and expectations of others. You've stopped identifying with roles that once confined you: the fixer, the caretaker, the savior. Now, you embody presence. You inspire, not by rescuing, but by radiating authenticity. You don't chase understanding anymore because you've accepted that not everyone is meant to meet you at your level of awareness. Some will only understand the world through their wounds, and you've made peace with that. This is when you know you've passed the dark test of the soul, when drama no longer seduces you, when chaos no longer shakes you, and when compassion no longer costs you your peace. You've become immune to projection because you've seen through the illusion itself. And in that awareness, you've found what Carl Jung and every seeker of truth eventually finds: the unshakable stillness of your own soul. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue uncovering the power of self-awareness and the freedom that comes with being immune to projection. 4. Awakened intuition and synchronicity. When the light of logic finally meets the flame of intuition, something sacred awakens within you. The mind that once demanded proof begins to bow to the quiet wisdom of the soul. You no longer think only with reason, you feel with understanding. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the moment when your spirituality deepens into true spiritual awakening. You begin to perceive that life has always been whispering to you through intuition, signs, and sensations that logic alone could never grasp. Your inner knowing becomes louder than the voices of fear or authority. And suddenly, the invisible world begins to reveal its patterns through synchronicity, moments too meaningful to be chance, guiding you like a hidden compass toward your higher path. You start noticing that every emotion, every encounter, every coincidence holds significance. Someone crosses your path at the exact moment you need encouragement. You see the same numbers or symbols repeating until you pause and reflect. You wake up from a dream that feels more like a message than imagination. The rational mind calls it coincidence, but your awakened awareness knows it's divine coordination. Synchronicity becomes proof that life is not random, but deeply intelligent. The same energy that forms galaxies also arranges moments in your life with purpose. This is when you begin to sense hidden truths behind appearances, to read the emotional energy that lingers between words, to feel when something is right long before evidence appears. Your intuition grows stronger the more you trust it. The ego, once so loud, starts to lose its grip because it feeds on control, while intuition thrives in surrender. You realize that your inner voice, gentle but firm, has always been guiding you toward freedom. It doesn't shout, it whispers, yet its accuracy is undeniable. It tells you when to hold on and when to let go, when to wait and when to act. It doesn't argue with logic, it transcends it. You stop searching for validation from others because the clarity within you is now enough. The authority of your soul becomes greater than any external rule. You no longer move through life trying to figure everything out. You move through it, feeling guided by something larger, wiser, and infinitely loving. As this trust deepens, you live in flow rather than resistance. Each synchronicity feels like a conversation with the universe, an invisible dialogue reminding you that you are supported, seen, and aligned. You begin to realize that spirituality isn't about escaping reality, but perceiving it more clearly. The veil of coincidence lifts, revealing an intricate design behind every experience. You feel the rhythm of life pulsing through you, showing you that everything is connected and every moment is alive with meaning. Jung believed that such moments of synchronicity were messages from the self, the divine aspect of consciousness that seeks to unite all parts of who we are. Through this understanding, you awaken to a higher intelligence moving through you, teaching you that nothing is ever truly separate or accidental. In this expanded awareness, intuition becomes your bridge between worlds, between thought and feeling, seen and unseen, human and divine. Logic still has its place, but it now serves the greater wisdom of the heart. You understand that real intelligence is not cold or analytical. It is alive, fluid, and guided by love. You stop forcing outcomes and start allowing them to unfold. The more you align with this inner flow, the more life aligns with you. Synchronicities increase, opportunities appear effortlessly, and your steps are illuminated one at a time by trust. This is the silent power of spiritual awakening, to live in harmony with the unseen forces shaping your destiny. To know without needing to explain, and to walk forward guided not by fear, but by the quiet certainty of your soul. 5. Embracing death-rebirth cycles. When you reach the stage of embracing the death-rebirth cycle, you begin to live with a quiet wisdom that few ever understand. You no longer see endings as failures or punishments, but as sacred passages guiding your spiritual growth. There's a deep calm that comes when you finally accept that everything, Relationships, ambitions, versions of yourself must sometimes fall away for the soul to evolve. You've stopped clinging to the illusion of permanence, and instead, you've started to trust the invisible rhythm of life itself. Loss no longer frightens you because you see it as a part of renewal, a necessary cleansing that makes space for something purer to rise. The fear of uncertainty dissolves, and in its place comes serenity, knowing that every ending carries the seed of a new beginning. You've learned that death is not always physical. It's symbolic. It's the death of who you were so you can become who you're meant to be. Every time you shed an outdated identity, a limiting belief, or an old dream that no longer resonates with your truth, you are reborn in spirit. You remember those moments when silence felt unbearable and when everything seemed to stand still. But now, you see that stillness as the cocoon between one life phase and another. The darkness that once terrified you has become your teacher. It's the womb of transformation, where your soul reorganizes itself into higher order and clarity. Through surrender, not struggle, you have found peace. This is where spirituality matures when you create from flow, not force. When you allow instead of control. When you rest without guilt and trust without resistance. As you move deeper into spiritual growth, your definition of success transforms. Once, you chased progress through endless striving, achieving, accumulating, but now you measure growth by authenticity. You've realized that real progress is invisible. It's the way your heart expands, how your reactions soften, and how your presence becomes lighter. Your power no longer comes from control, but from surrender. You live in alignment with the natural rhythm of life, the cycle of growth, rest, and rebirth, and you've stopped demanding that life always move upward. You know that even the most still moments are sacred because they prepare the soil for new creation. This inner transformation mirrors what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole. Every death within you invites integration. Every rebirth reveals another layer of your true self. Through every ending, you've learned to hold both beauty and pain with grace. You no longer resist change because you've seen that what dissolves was never meant to last, and what remains is eternal. The soul's evolution demands courage, the courage to let go without bitterness, to trust when nothing makes sense, to open your heart even when the past has taught you to close it. And in doing so, you pass one of life's deepest spiritual tests, the test of surrender. So when you can face loss with peace, meet silence with faith, and allow transformation to unfold without rushing to escape it, know that you have transcended one of the soul's greatest lessons. You are living proof that death and rebirth are not opposites, but partners in your awakening. You've learned to die to illusion so that truth can live through you. And in that sacred balance, spirituality stops being an idea. It becomes your way of being, your rhythm, your freedom. Do you feel the power of renewal flowing through your soul? If you do, declare it boldly in the comments. I rise with every rebirth. Let this be a reminder that every ending is just the beginning of your transformation. 6. Inner authority over external validation. When you no longer crave praise or fear criticism, something profound awakens within you, the birth of inner authority. It's a quiet power that Carl Jung called the voice of the self, that sacred center of consciousness that stands unshaken by the chaos of the external world. You begin to feel that your worth is not something the world can give or take away. It flows from a deeper truth that lives within you. The applause of others becomes a pleasant sound, but no longer your motivation, and disapproval no longer breaks you, because you understand that both are just echoes, not reflections of your essence. You finally see that what truly matters is not being approved of, but being aligned with your own values, your timing, and your truth. As you step into this higher state of awareness, the constant need to please begins to dissolve. You stop performing to be liked, stop bending to fit expectations, and stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. You start acting not from social conditioning, but from soul alignment. Every choice you make comes from a place of integrity rather than insecurity, from a space of clarity rather than confusion. You realize that validation from others is a substitute for the connection you once lacked with yourself. And when that connection is restored, the world's judgment fades into background noise. This is the quiet strength that comes from spiritual wisdom, the strength to walk your path without asking for permission. The beauty of this transformation is in its simplicity. You become humble, yet unshakably confident, no longer needing to prove your worth to anyone. You move through life grounded, aware that real confidence doesn't need to shout, and true humility doesn't need to hide. The world may still try to test you. People may misunderstand, criticize, or even doubt you. But now their opinions meet a version of you that is untouchable because it is authentic. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When you start acting from inner awareness instead of external influence, you stop living by fate and start living by choice. This is what it means to have passed one of the soul's greatest trials. The test is not about fame, power, or validation. It's about sovereignty over your own mind. You've learned that your peace doesn't depend on the world being pleased with you. You've discovered that you can stand alone and still feel whole, because your foundation is built on truth. When you embody this, you become like a tree rooted deeply in the earth, still, silent, but unmovable even in the fiercest storm. And that is where Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom comes alive. The realization that liberation is not found in being admired, but in being real. You no longer chase light outside of you because you found it within. And that light now guides every step of your journey. 7. Energetic sovereignty. You begin to understand that energy is sacred currency, and every exchange, every thought, every word, every act is a transaction that either enriches or depletes your spirit. Spiritual wisdom teaches that true power lies not in giving endlessly, but in giving consciously. You stop offering your energy out of guilt or obligation and start sharing it as a deliberate act of love and awareness. You no longer confuse kindness with self-sacrifice, nor compassion with self-betrayal. You say no without apology because you finally know that protecting your peace is not cruelty, it is responsibility. In this awareness, boundaries are no longer walls built from fear, but gates of discernment through which only truth may enter. You recognize that the highest form of generosity begins with honoring your own energy, for you cannot pour from an empty vessel. As your consciousness expands, your focus shifts from controlling the world around you to mastering the world within. You stop trying to fix or change others, realizing that every attempt to control another is a distraction from the work of mastering yourself. Carl Jung once said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." In that awakening, you find strength not in dominance, but in presence. You no longer chase validation or approval, because you understand that external power fades while inner power grows quietly and steadily. You start to feel a grounded calm and unshakable center that no chaos can disturb. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer perform transformation, you live it. In this stage of spiritual awakening, you radiate an energy that speaks louder than words. Your silence carries weight. Your calm presence becomes a sanctuary for others, and your authenticity inspires without effort. The need to prove your worth dissolves, for your existence itself becomes evidence of growth. Transformation is no longer an event. It is a state of being. You embody your lessons so deeply that they no longer need to be explained. Spirituality ceases to be performance and becomes vibration, a frequency that can only be felt. You realize that the soul's true evolution is measured not by how loudly you declare your light, but by how effortlessly you embody it. And as you reach this quiet mastery, you find peace in simplicity. You move through life with a gentle confidence, aware that every boundary you set, every breath you take, every moment of stillness is a declaration of sovereignty. Your energy becomes your language. Your composure becomes your signature. You understand that calmness is not weakness, but the highest expression of power, the kind that flows, not forces. You no longer need to fight to be seen. You are seen because your vibration speaks before your voice ever does. You give without depletion, love without losing yourself, and live without pretending. Transformation no longer needs to be performed. It only needs to be lived. This is the essence of spiritual wisdom, the art of becoming so whole within yourself that your very presence is your protection and your peace is your power. To honor your awakening and the power of your energetic sovereignty, claim your truth now. Comment below, "My energy is my sanctuary," to affirm your mastery and remind others that true freedom begins within. And so, if you've quietly walked through the darkness and found light within yourself, know that you've already passed Jung's greatest test of the soul. The journey wasn't meant to destroy you, but to reveal the strength that was hidden in your depths. Every shadow you faced was simply guiding you back to wholeness. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos filled with deeper insights from Carl Jung and timeless spiritual truths. Your soul's awakening has just begun to stay with us on this path of growth and illumination.